Cliff, the United States versus itself doesn't exactly sound like a ringing endorsement of the American democratic process in the year 2024. What exactly do you mean by this?
We mean that, look, as soon as Donald Trump gets the endorsement, the nomination of his party, this country is going to turn into two halves. He is going to control the agenda. He's going to get the money. He's going to get the TV. He's going to start to set the agenda. And then the country's at war with itself, as far as we're concerned. The campaign's going to be ugly. You have indictment versus impeachment. You have two old guys that nobody really wants to run. It's going to be very ugly. Democratic institutions are already eroding in this country, and they're going to start eroding very quickly, I think, after the campaign starts heating up.
Well, let's walk a little further down that path here, because I'm curious what you have in mind. We've been hearing references to the Civil War on the campaign trail. Donald Trump over the weekend in Iowa. You know, Nikki Haley was asked about that. Of course, how far does this go before we're having that conversation again in modern history?
I think we'll be having the conversation very soon as he gets the nomination again. I think the Civil War, is a bit over the top. American institutions, these guys that created this country were really smart.
Yeah.
I think they got human greed right. They put these three, checks and balances together so it can't go too far. Can this country take 4 more years of Donald Trump? We may find out. I think on balance, yeah, but we're going to come out pretty badly bruised after that. So I wouldn't go to civil war. I think that's kind of a good soundbite. I don't think it's really accurate yet. Mm-hmm. But I think we better really be careful what happens starting in March and all the way through November.
So is the greater risk in your mind Trump winning the 2024 election or him not winning in 2024, and much like 2020, casting doubt on whether the democratic process worked as
the Electoral Count Act? There's legislation now that makes it's a lot harder to go back and try to revisit. Plus, as you know, in the midterms, all the secretaries of state that were election deniers, they all lost. Mm-hmm. So I think going after Steele again is going to be really hard. So I think Trump winning is the election. But I got to say, when I look at the numbers, if the election were held today, I'd go 60-40. Not a lot of confidence in that call, but 60-40 Trump. I think he's got the edge right now. The greater risk is if he wins. Then what do we get? He appoints loyalists. He kind of makes the civil service into a political service to fire the people he doesn't like. Mm-hmm. Then he could convert, probably would convert the DOJ, the Department of Justice, and the FBI into political institutions and go after his enemies and the Bidens. People in the Biden administration, some of whom I'm talking to, are now scared that they're going to be in jeopardy, personal jeopardy, their families, if Trump wins.
He said himself that he would indict Joe Biden if reelected, using language that I can't use here on the air. Yep. But, Cliff, when we look down the list, number 2, Middle East on the brink, a partitioned Ukraine is 3. Both of those directly involve the United States at this point, don't they?
Well, they do. We make the point that very good allies of the United States, Israel and Ukraine, because of the belief system of their leaders, could drag this country into wars that we really don't want, more a part of here. Bibi Netanyahu, I think wag the dog, even with Netanyahu's a little pushing it, but he may want to keep the war going to stay out of jail. Credible, okay? And if he gets into a war with Iran or Hezbollah, boom, I think, we're kind of in. Ukraine, the Black Sea is a tinderbox. If something goes wrong in the Black Sea, and it could be right now, Ukraine is exporting grain very cleverly around the border, around Bulgaria, Romania, the Bosphorus. If the Russians, and they're debating this, sink a ship there, we could have an international crisis, and war at sea can escalate very quickly. So we're kind of exposed on both counts.
Well, I want to talk about the Middle East some more, as that is your number 2 risk on the list this year. And this is actually something that Secretary of State Antony Blinken, while in the region, spoke about, talking about this idea of escalation. Take a listen.
It's clearly not in the interest of anyone, Israel, Lebanon, Hezbollah, for that matter, to see this escalate and to see an actual conflict. And the Israelis have been very clear with us that they want to find a diplomatic way forward.
The U.S. has been pushing this idea that they would not like to see this escalate into a broader regional conflict. It seems like we get closer and closer every day if you just look at the developments in the headlines. What does a broader regional conflict, though, actually mean? What is it most likely to look like, knowing that there's Iranian proxies, but other Arab allies in this conversation as well?
Now, the most likely way we get there, and I think what it would look like if we see it, is Israel attacks Hezbollah or Hezbollah attacks Israel. Once we get there, then Iran's main proxy, the resistance front's crown jewel, is in play. And they're not going to let it get worn down very far before they come in.
Iran directly.
Iran directly, right. And then we have Iran more in the war. IRGC troops, Iran Revolutionary Guard Corps troops in Lebanon. At the same time, if Israel gets pressed by Hezbollah and Iran, the U.S. is in. I think the U.S. is in anyway if Israel and Hezbollah get mixed up with air support from the carriers. So that could escalate very quickly. The one I think we might read about in coming weeks, though, much sooner, is I think I'd be surprised if the U.S. didn't hit the Houthis sooner rather than later. That's an accident waiting to happen. Now, the Houthis aren't as close to Iran as Hezbollah is, so there's a little bit more play there before we get into real trouble. But it gets messy.
You've been gaming out some pretty horrifying scenarios here
for that,
at Eurasia Group. You sure do, Cliff. Number 3, back to Ukraine, a partitioned Ukraine, as you put it. We're going to learn at some point in the coming weeks whether a border deal emerges in Washington and whether Ukraine funding will follow. Yeah. If that does not happen, does that number 3, a partitioned Ukraine, become more likely?
Well, let me first say that we say things as we see them. We don't like them as much as anybody else does. I mean, I think Ukraine is going in a bad direction right now. First off, even if we get another big appropriation this year for Ukraine, I think it's likely to be the last big appropriation for the United States. If Trump wins, forget it. Yeah. But we've seen what happens even if you have a Democratic president, and let's say we get a Democratic sweep. Not going to happen. If you get a Democratic sweep, we've seen the movie. It's really hard to get money for Ukraine now. So I think Ukraine is probably not going to get much more than this appropriation. Ukraine, the material balance, Russia's doing better on missiles, on manpower. Russia's on the offensive in Donetsk Oblast. I think Ukraine's got to turn around this year. They've got to stop the infighting in the government. They've got to scale up weapons production. Or I think next year we could talk about Ukraine beginning to lose. Lose meaning having to accept an unfavorable armistice where they give up more land. Now, I don't like that. I'm an American. I don't like that. But
it's a global risk.
Well, we call it as we see it. That's what that is.